Hi, everyone. A grand question. How do you get from eating angst, war, sadness, despair, discouragement, to eating peace? The gap between those two things can seem like as big as the Grand Canyon, right? Or from here to the moon, practically. If you are somebody that's had the struggle endlessly or off and on, sometimes people have had this for most of their lives. I used to feel this way when I was suffering from bulimic episodes and then a whole period of anorexic starvation and everything in between. And, very intense over exercising that was sort of torturous and difficult, racing cross country, um, and trying to be athletic all the time. Just all these extreme bouncing back and forth in my physical life and in my relationship with food and eating and how that all tied in together. The difference between how I was and how I wanted to be seemed so extreme. I was baffled. And I was despairing about how extreme it seemed. But there is a way to take little steps and to move into sort of a calmer way with this journey from eating war to eating peace. And you can take it because I did too. When I've looked back and mapped out sort of what happened for me and how that all sort of slowly but surely dissolved and ended, I could see these incredible moments that made this gigantic difference in something that I learned. And I probably can't share the entire thing with you today in my short little eating peace video here. But I've got a webinar coming up on November 8th, and I hope you all join me. So I'm going to share more about this journey from eating war to eating peace and the different components that I think are really vital and important to look at in order to, arrive where you really want to be, which actually can happen now, oddly enough. The peace part can happen now, can be possible for you today. You don't have to wait. You don't have to suffer for however many years or however long of a time. It can come to you in the present moment. But again, baffling. Okay, how do we do that? So what I want to share with you today is this notion of just to point you in the direction of where to go, which place to look at. Because sometimes it's like that, we've all heard that story where there's a man on the ground underneath a big spotlight, a lamp out in the street, looking and looking for his keys. And another man comes along and says, "Oh, what are you looking for?" "My keys, I've lost my keys." "Oh, when did you last see them?" "Back by my car, which is down half a block away, parked on the street." And the guy says, "Well, then why aren't you looking back at your car? I'll go help you look over there." "Well, there's no light over there, so I can't look for my keys over here. I'm looking for them here." Kind of insanity, right? Well, but we're kind of like that when it comes to food and eating. We're looking and looking often at how we act and what we want to have, and it's not what we want. So we're just looking over and over again at not this, not this. This isn't what I want. And you're in this dark place. You're trying to find by looking at what you can see and not really seeing what is under the surface. And tell you, it's not going to be that hard. Okay, so you may have been very familiar with a common saying that is used in metaphysics, but it's also in cognitive psychology, early childhood behavior and development, and has been in academic circles maybe long before metaphysics. I don't know. Maybe they're both going on at the same time. But the phrase is think, feel, act, have. Think, feel, act, have. If you're not familiar with it, you can write that down. It's it's sort of like the way things unroll in the human experience as we're living, and the cause and effect in a way of brain, feelings, activities, actions all lining up together. So thinking, feeling, acting, having. What we'll usually do is be looking constantly over at that have, the final result, right? Wow, we see out in the world what we'd like to have, Hollywood movie star body, or somebody who looks like a monk who eats peacefully and is never bothered for one single moment by any kind of food, you know, no cravings, whatever it is that we're imagining that we think we see. And we look a little bit or a lot at the way these people are acting and the way we act and how that lines up and seems like this complete disconnect. You know, they are not the same. Look at me. There'll be so much self-criticism on how you're acting when you're not doing it right. And actually a lot of sort of praise and holding on to, look at how great I am when I am doing it right. But there's a lot of right or wrong behind all that. And it's very stressful on both sides in some ways. Like if you're on a diet and you're keeping that diet, and I remember this feeling, and you're super rigid about it, you start to feel all sort of puffed up about your brilliant accomplishment. But if you haven't really looked at the thinking and feeling part so much, you might fall off that thing. And that's where we get this term like, I fell off the wagon, you know, or I falling off this diet. It's as if there is this dark precipice someplace, if you haven't addressed that you could fall into again. So it's a little bit nervous and stressful. Like, I got to keep this thing that I'm doing it correctly and properly. Doesn't mean to not stop doing that if that's where you are right now. Beautiful, because it can be much more calming to have a structure and you're following it. But then you really need to look at thinking and feeling. Now, why do we not look at this so much? They go by so fast. Thoughts. I mean, I heard someplace 60,000 thoughts a day or more, or 100,000. I did the math, and it came out to, if I was awake for, I can't remember however many hours it was, it's at least a thought a second. I don't know how they would measure that, but that's a lot of impulses. That's a lot of thoughts happening very quickly. It's so quick that unless you write it down, unless you sort of analyze and spend time with it, you're not going to be able to see it very clearly. It's going to speed by. You won't even remember what you thought last hour. You probably don't remember that right now. It's just the way it works. Feeling, we have a lot of resistance to looking at feeling because there's great feeling phobia. I had tremendous phobia about feeling anger. It was so uncomfortable and so bad and so wrong in my mind to feel anger that I didn't let myself ever feel it. I usually wound up eating instead. There's other feelings that also people have great phobia about. Feeling unsafe. They'll do anything they can to not feel unsafe. So they're managing safety in their lives constantly, or to feel powerless, or to feel empty. So I talk about those three realms or elements of feeling that really dominate people that often have eating issues or addiction of any kind. And we find out more about that in other programs that I do, or some of these videos, you know, spending a little time on those. But so the place to begin, you know, I talk about journaling all the time because it actually captures those thoughts and you can write them down. So just consider dropping for today, acting and having, and using your imagination to always look at how you're acting or what you might have in the future, and that it being a big disaster or absolutely wonderful. And just let go of those goals and ideas about this whole eating thing, and let's look at thinking and feeling instead. And the very, very place to start with that is to just consider slowing way down, being like a scientist in a way. I have got to look and understand this process of thinking and feeling and what's happening within. I am being invited to look because something's off balance here. I'm at war, not at peace, which is much more a natural human condition, to kind of come back to balance, to be in peace around food and eating. I know I want that. So let's look at what's happening when I'm at war. It's almost like you have to look and see what's happening when you're at war before you can find peace. So identifying your thoughts, looking at your feeling phobias and saying, okay, it's going to be okay to feel what I do. I need to look at this. All right. We'll talk more about this in future videos, but meanwhile, come visit me at the webinar on November 8th. We'll go much more in depth on some of this. All right. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.